how we taught the aliens to play snowballs. My name is Jack Larson, and I never thought my little rescue team would become famous for snowballs. It all started when we were sitting in our little cabin in the mountains of Colorado as usual. Myself, my friend Bobby, and my sister Susan were drinking hot chocolate and discussing how we could diversify a boring winter day. Suddenly, there was a strange rumbling sound. We looked out the window and saw something that made us put our mugs back on the table. A flying saucer-shaped craft had landed in our backyard, all shiny like it had just been waxed. "So, Bobby, you want to go first?" I said, trying not to bring out the tremor in my voice. "Are you laughing, Jack?" Bobby set his mug down and stared at me. "You're always the first one to get into trouble. So go." "Okay, coward," I said, pulling on my hat and picking up the shovel. Not because I was going to attack anyone, but just in case. Susan, of course, couldn't stay away. She ran out after me, pulling on her pink reindeer mittens. We cautiously approached the ship. The hatch opened with a loud hiss, and 3 aliens stepped out of there. They looked like a mixture of an octopus and a large cactus. Each was greenish in color with glowing eyes, and at the ends of their tentacles were something like fluffy gloves. The first to speak was the tallest of them. Let's call him Uggy. We never understood their real names, because their language sounded like a mixture of a quacking duckling and a xylophone. "Bliblo blah 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 blah," he said, pointing at us. "Oh my God, they want to eat us," Bobby whispered, looking out the window. But Uggy didn't seem aggressive. He lifted one of his tentacles and started drawing circles in the air. I knew right away that he was asking us to show us something. "Maybe it wanted to play," Susan suggested. "Yes, of course he does. On their planet, they probably play catch the Earth idiot." Bobby stopped panicking. "Let's just find out what they want," I said, bid down, picked up some snow, and made a snowball. As soon as I threw the snowball on the ground in front of Uggy, his eyes literally lit up. He made a joyful sound that could only be described as flip-a-flop, and grabbed the snow with his tentacle and began to study it. After a couple seconds, he tried to do the same thing I did. Uggy, of course, missed. His snowball looked more like a crooked snowflake, which landed on my shoe with a thud. "I think we just taught the aliens the most important winter tradition," Susan grinned. And then chaos ensued. Uggy apparently realized what the game was all about. He called out to his companions, and they began to make snowballs too. However, instead of throwing them at someone, they began to throw them in different directions, sometimes even at each other. "It's like a snowball fight," Bobby said, hiding behind a tree. After a few minutes, all 3 aliens approached us. Uggy, smiling, if you can call it that, pointed at us and at the mountain of snow that lay nearby. "They want a team match," Susan announced. "What? We can't play against that," Bobby said, pointing to the biggest of the aliens, who had already made a snowball the size of a basketball. But there was nowhere to go. The game was on. Chapter 2, The Snowball Fight of the Century. Susan and I were instantly entrenched behind the nearest wall of snow. Bobby took up the defense behind an old dumpster that stood by the barn. The aliens, however, did not erect shelters. Instead, they used their long tentacles to pick up several snowballs at once and throw them with the accuracy of a professional baseball player. "Ow! That hurt!" shouted Bobby, when one of Uggy's snowballs hit him right in the ear. "Okay, hold it," Susan shouted, throwing me a snowball. I'll be honest, we tried our best. But the aliens were born players. Their coordination was amazing. Uggy even managed to do stunts like 360-degree backflips. At one point, Susan decided to take the lead. She picked up a huge piece of snow, poured glitter into it, which for some reason was in her pocket, and launched it right at Uggy. He even recoiled in surprise. And you know what? Glitter was their weakness. They immediately started gathering around the snowball, studying it, and forgot all about the game. Susan, is that a glitter bomb? I wondered. Well, why? It works, she replied, smiling victoriously. The end of the first round was ours. But then the aliens decided to complicate the rules. One of them, I nicknamed him Spike, pulled something like a portable snow cannon out of his ship. Now the snowballs were flying at such a high rate of speed that it was almost impossible to dodge. This isn't fair. Bobby was indignant, raising a white flag from his handkerchief. But the aliens only laughed their strange quacking laughter. Chapter 3. The Bottom Line. By evening, it ended in a truce. We stood in the snow, wet but satisfied. The aliens seemed to have remained enamored with the game. Before flying away, Uggy made one last flip-a-flop and handed us a small glowing balloon. Is that a trophy? I asked. The balloon flashed and started playing a short video clip. It showed us fighting snowballs against the aliens, and toward the end, a caption appeared. Great Earth teachers of snow warfare. Thank you. Well guys, now we're known in the galaxy, I said as I watched the ship go off into the sky. Bobby just shook his head. I was right after all. I shouldn't have left the house. Chapter 4. Uninvited Guests. The next day was business as usual. We were going to drink hot chocolate and discuss yesterday's events. But as soon as I opened the door, my brain refused to believe in reality. Standing in our front yard was another flying ship. Are you kidding me? Bobby groaned, peering over my shoulder. This ship was bigger than yesterday's, and it looked kind of frustrated. If flying saucers could be upset at all. The hatch opened, and this time 3 other aliens came out. They were taller. Their tentacles looked like giant whips, and they held something like clipboards in their hands. The main one of them, let's call him Skrill, came right up to us. Are you Jack, Susan, and Bobby? He suddenly asked in perfect English. Yes? I replied, not sure how to respond. We have a problem, Skrill said. You have taught our friends a very dangerous game. Dangerous? It's just snowballs. Susan marveled. Just snowballs? Skrill looked at us as if we had violated space law. You don't understand. Uggy and his crew sent your match to an interstellar platform. Now our entire planet is trying to replicate this snow war, and it's turning into a disaster. Disaster? Bobby interjected. Yes. We're not equipped to play games with physical contact. Half the town is traumatized. We're running out of snow. And one of our scientists accidentally froze his boss. Susan and I looked at each other. Yeah, well, that's something we didn't see coming. Okay, what can we do? I asked. You must fly with us and teach everyone how to play safely, Skrill said. Fly with you? Bobby almost let go of his mug. No, thank you. But Susan was already glowing with enthusiasm. Of course we're in. When do we leave? Chapter 5. The Star-Spangled Snowball Course. A couple hours later, we were already flying through space. I didn't even have time to say goodbye to our dog, but Susan assured me that everything would be fine. When we landed on the planet Skrill, I realized why he was talking about disaster. Everything looked like the aftermath of a snow apocalypse. There were giant piles of snow everywhere. The buildings were icy, and the locals were hiding behind shelters, throwing snowballs in panic. "It's all your fault," Bobby muttered as we stepped out of the ship. Skrill led us to the main square, where a crowd of aliens had already gathered. They all looked tense, but very interested at the same time. "These are your teachers," Skrill said, pointing at us. The crowd immediately applauded. Someone even threw a snowball in the air as a sign of joy. We decided to start with some simple rules. 1. Don't mold snowballs bigger than the head of the average octopus. 2. Don't use snowmakers indoors. 3. And most importantly, no ice balls. Susan, as always, was in her element. She even organized teams, assigned judges, and showed how to build safe snow forts. Bobby, of course, complained that we would be stuck here forever. But when he was called king of marksmanship, he relented. Things ended up being much calmer after a couple days. The aliens not only learned to play by the rules, but also came up with a few tricks of their own. For example, they had glowing snowballs that flashed as they flew. Before we left, Skrill came up to us and said, "We are grateful to you. Snowball fights will now become our national tradition." "Well, if you need anything, call us," I said. "We'll be sure to call you. In the meantime, here you go." Skrill handed us another glowing balloon. This time, it was a list with the schedule for the intergalactic snow warfare tournament. "Jack, we have a whole galaxy to win," Susan said proudly. "Yeah, as long as we don't get frozen," I replied. When we got home, I looked at Bobby. "Are you glad you're out of the house now?" He only mumbled, "I just want some hot chocolate." And you know what? This time I backed him up. Chapter 6, Tournament of the Century. A month had passed. We had pretty much forgotten about the alien adventure, and things were back to normal. Snow, hot chocolate, movies in the evenings. One evening, however, a bright beam of light hit the window again, and a familiar hum broke the silence. "Not again!" Bobby sighed, burying his face into his pillow. But when we stepped outside, we were met not by Skrill and his crew, but by a whole delegation of aliens. Uggy, Skrill, and a dozen other races stood in front of our house. Uggy looked especially happy, and waved his tentacles so vigorously that he hit a neighbor's mailbox. "What is it this time?" I asked, feeling slightly panicked. "The Snow Wars tournament," Skrill announced cheerfully. "We have organized the first intergalactic championship, and you must participate." "We," Bobby and I shouted in unison. "Of course we are," Uggy confirmed, mumbling something in his own language. "You're our teachers." Can we say no?" Bobby raised his hand, but was immediately ignored. Chapter 7, Star Rivals. A couple days later, we found ourselves in the space arena. Imagine a stadium the size of a small city, made entirely of transparent material that reflected the stars. The snow in the arena was artificial, but so soft and shiny that you wanted to throw yourself into it and just lie there. We were announced as Team Earth. Susan insisted we bring her glitter. She called it our secret weapon. Bobby, on the other hand, brought a thermos of hot chocolate and some plastic spoons, just in case. Among the competitors were 1. A team from the planet Zord. They looked like giant snowy owls with sharp beaks. 2. The Omega 7 robotic squad. Their snowballs were perfectly shaped and fed from catapults. 3. Fluff balls from Fluorilla Small, furry creatures with amazingly fast paws. "We're dead," Bobby said, looking at the robots. "No, we're not," Susan smiled. "We have intelligence, ingenuity, and those sequins. Chapter 8. Game On. I realized that the robots were the main threat. They shot snowballs at such a high rate of speed that one of them knocked off my hat. Okay, now I'm mad, I said, and fired a snowball at one of the robots. Susan suggested a strategy. We had to work as a team. She distracted the robots with her shiny snowballs, and Bobby, sitting in the shelter, came up with his traps. His main find was a plastic spoon. He used it as a catapult to launch snowballs to incredible heights. Soon the robots began to overheat, and we had our first victory. The second round with the Zorgs proved more difficult. These birds could fly, and were dumping snow on us from above. But Bobby came up with the idea of making a giant rocket out of the snow and launched it right at their leader. The birds quickly retreated. Bobby, you're a born strategist, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. Yeah, just don't ask me to do it again, he muttered. Chapter 9. The Finals. The finals were intense. We ran into the fluff balls, who were much more cunning than they looked. They moved so fast, they seemed like blurs. They're just smearing snow. Bobby was indignant. That's their strategy. Susan shouted, We've got to figure something out. And then I remembered our old trick, the glitter bomb. We made a huge snowball, added glitter, and threw it right into the center of the field. The fluffers froze, mesmerized by the glittering particles, and we quickly began to knock them out. A few minutes later, the buzzer sounded, and we were declared the winners. Chapter 10. Homecoming. After the tournament, we were rewarded with medals that glowed in the dark and a cup in the shape of a giant snowball. How does it feel to be galactic champions? I asked Bobby when we got home. Honestly, all I want to do is sleep and forget about this snowy nightmare. Susan was already planning how to use the trophy as decorations for the Christmas tree. And me? I just smiled. We'd done the impossible. We taught the galaxy how to play snowball and even become its champions. But honestly, I hope the next bell from the sky wouldn't come soon enough.